What happens when a billionaire CEO ignores his pregnant wife in her final hours? But the biggest shock is yet to come. His ruthless rival steps in, not only to save her life but to become the father of her twins. Can love and betrayal collide in such a powerful way? Watch as the twists unfold in this shocking, emotional journey that no one saw coming. Stay with us till the end to see how one moment changes everything, and how revenge, redemption, and true love will reshape their lives forever. The evening sky outside was painted in hues of deep orange and purple as the storm clouds gathered, signaling an impending downpour. Inside the luxurious penthouse, the air was thick with tension. Leena lay on the couch, clutching her belly, her face pale and strained. Her husband, James, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, paced the room, his phone glued to his ear. He barely spared her a glance as she winced in pain, the sharpness of each contraction making her body tremble. "Just sign the deal, and we can deal with the rest later," James said into the phone, his voice cold and detached. Leena's heart sank. She had always been invisible to him, just another piece of the puzzle in his relentless climb to power. But today, she needed him more than ever. She called out to him, her voice weak, "James, please, something is wrong." He didn't hear her. His eyes remained fixed on the glowing screen, his mind consumed by numbers, deadlines, and profits. Her breathing became shallow, every inhale a struggle, every exhale a sob of silent desperation. The pain intensified, and she closed her eyes, her hand pressing harder against her belly, as if that would bring relief. The seconds stretched into eternity. James remained oblivious, his world revolving around his work, the silence between them growing louder with each passing moment. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Startled, Leena tried to sit up, but the weight of her body seemed to push her deeper into the cushions. James glanced up briefly, then returned to his conversation. The door opened, and in stepped a figure she never expected to see again. Damien, James's rival and the man who once held her heart. Damien's eyes met hers, and in that moment, the world seemed to fall away. He rushed to her side, his presence a stark contrast to James's indifference. "Leena," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "What's happening?" Her eyes welled up with tears. I'm scared. Damien. The babies, they're coming, but James." She couldn't finish the sentence. Damien's gaze hardened as he turned toward James, still engrossed in his business call. The anger that flashed in his eyes was quickly replaced with something deeper, compassion. He reached for Leena's hand, offering his strength as a steady anchor. The pain surged again, this time more intense, and Leena cried out, her body shaking. Damien's voice was gentle, soothing. "It's going to be all right. I'm here, Leena. I won't leave you." Her eyes fluttered shut, and she could feel the warmth of his touch, the strength of his presence. Meanwhile, James hung up the phone and glanced up, his expression unreadable. He stepped toward them, his gaze flicking to Damien's hand holding Leena's, then back to his wife, his face betraying no emotion. Damien stood, his voice calm but firm. "You should have been here, James." James froze, his lips tightening as he locked eyes with his rival. Leena's hand slipped from his, and she let out a low groan. Damien's hand was firm, his grip steady. A wave of nausea swept over her, and she felt herself slipping into unconsciousness. Damien leaned in, his voice urgent. "Leena, stay with me. Focus on me. The babies are almost here." Her vision blurred, but she could still hear his voice, soothing her as her body fought against the overwhelming pain. A moment later, she felt a rush of warmth, and then, the unmistakable sound of tiny cries. Her twins had arrived. Damien gently cradled one of the babies in his arms, his heart racing with a mix of awe and responsibility. He turned to James, who stood still, watching with cold eyes. "Do you want to meet your children?" Damien asked, his voice sharp with a hidden edge. James didn't move. The silence hung thick in the air, as though the weight of the moment had crushed all his defenses. Leena's breath steadied as she gazed at Damien, her savior. Her children, now safe in his arms, were the only proof she needed. He was the one who would stand by her, not the man who had ignored her final hours. Leena reached out, her hands trembling, and gently touched Damien's arm, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you," she said, her words filled with gratitude and disbelief. Damien smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "There's no need to thank me, Leena. I promised I would never leave you." The room felt like it was closing in on her, yet Damien's presence provided a strange sense of calm. Her gaze flickered back to James, still standing in the doorway, the hardness of his expression never wavering. He said nothing, his eyes cold, almost calculating, as he watched the scene unfold before him. Leena couldn't tell if it was anger, jealousy, or something else that flickered in his gaze, but it made her heart ache all over again. She had spent so many years trying to be everything for him, the perfect wife, the perfect partner. But in her most vulnerable moment, the one time she needed him the most, he had turned away. Damien's voice brought her back to the present. "Let's get you both settled, Leena. These little ones need you." She nodded weakly, and he carefully placed one of the babies into her arms. As she gazed down at the tiny, fragile life in her hands, tears welled up in her eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt the weight of responsibility mixed with overwhelming love. Damien stood nearby, watching over them, his steady presence a constant reassurance. James had yet to move, still holding his position at the doorway. It was as if he had become a mere spectator in his own life, unable to connect with what was unfolding. The tension between them thickened, yet Leena found herself focusing only on the life in her arms and the warmth of Damien's quiet comfort. She couldn't deny it any longer. This was the man who had always cared for her. Not the one who had ignored her, but the one who had shown up when she needed him most. James stepped forward, his voice low and calculated. "What's going to happen now?" Damien didn't look at him directly, but answered with a calm resolve. "I'll make sure these children grow up knowing love, James. You weren't here when they needed you. But I was." The words struck like a sharp blade, and for the first time, Leena saw something shift in James's eyes. But it wasn't regret. It was something darker, something colder. He took a step back, his jaw tightening, before turning to leave without another word. Leena's heart sank, but the feeling of loss was no longer for him. It was for the man she thought he had been, the partner she had imagined he could be. She looked down at her babies, their tiny hands curled tightly around her fingers. They were all that mattered now. Damien remained at her side, his unwavering support wrapping around her like a protective shield. He had become something more than a savior. He had become the father her children needed. And as the night grew darker outside, Leena knew that the life she had imagined for herself, the one she thought would be with James, had slipped away. But in its place, something far more precious had taken root. She wasn't alone anymore. And her twins, her future, would be safe in Damien's care. Leena turned her gaze toward him, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Thank you, Damien, for everything." His smile was soft, filled with the promise of a new beginning. "I'll always be here, Leena. You and these kids are my world now." And in that moment, she realized just how much she had underestimated him. The man who had once been her rival was now the one who would stand beside her, a father to her children, and the one who would love her without hesitation. As the storm outside raged on, Leena held her newborn twins close, the weight of the past lifting, replaced by the warmth of the future. The storm outside intensified, its fierce winds rattling the windows, but inside, the penthouse felt like an entirely different world, one of warmth, safety, and a quiet hope that began to bloom in Leena's heart. She looked at Damien, her eyes soft with gratitude, yet the shadows of the past still lingered in the corners of her mind. She had always believed that her life would be defined by James, by the power they built together, by the empire they ran. But now, in the silence of this new chapter, she realized just how hollow that vision had been. The tiny breaths of her newborn twins, so fragile yet so full of promise, filled the air. Leena ran a finger gently over their small hands, her heart swelling with a love so pure, so fierce, it felt like it could shatter the walls that had once kept her heart closed off. Damien's presence beside her, steadfast and unwavering, was a balm to the pain she had carried for so long. He wasn't just a savior. He was something more, the one who would rebuild what had been broken. As the minutes passed, the storm outside began to subside, but the storm within her heart raged on, a mix of sorrow, relief, and uncertainty. She had never imagined that her life would take such a turn. That the man who had once been her rival would now be the one who would help her heal, who would father her children. "Damien," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I don't know what to do next. Everything has changed." Damien gently placed a hand on hers, his touch grounding her. "You don't have to do anything, Leena. We'll take it one step at a time. You're not alone in this anymore." She looked up at him, her eyes meeting his with a vulnerability she hadn't allowed herself to show in years. The weight of everything that had transpired, the neglect, the betrayal, and the birth of her children, seemed to lift as his words settled deep within her. "You've given me everything," she said, her voice trembling. "More than I ever thought I could have." Damien smiled softly, his eyes filled with understanding. "No, Leena. You've given me everything. Us. It's a new beginning. A chance to rewrite everything." As they sat in the soft glow of the room, the only sound the faint cooing of the babies in Leena's arms, something shifted between them. It wasn't just the beginning of their new life together. It was the beginning of something profound. Leena felt a tear slip down her cheek, but it was different this time. It wasn't one of sorrow, but of relief, of knowing that she was finally where she needed to be. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that things could be better. The future, once clouded by uncertainty and disappointment, now seemed full of possibility. As the night stretched on, Damien gently lifted one of the twins, holding the baby close to his chest. Leena watched him with a tenderness she hadn't known she was capable of. He was no longer just a rival. He was a protector, a partner, and a father. And in the quiet of that room, with the storm now a distant memory, Leena finally understood that true strength didn't come from power or wealth, it came from love. The kind of love that could heal, that could rebuild, and that could create a future far more beautiful than any empire could ever offer. The room felt peaceful now, the chaos of the storm outside a mere echo in the distance. Leena's gaze softened as she watched Damien with their children, his gentle touch reflecting a tenderness that went far beyond the man she had once known. Her heart swelled with a quiet realization. She wasn't just starting over. She was beginning a life she never thought possible, one built not on power, but on trust, on real connection. The air in the penthouse felt lighter, as if the weight of the past was slowly lifting, making space for something new. Damien's voice broke the silence. "Leena, do you want me to stay the night? You shouldn't be alone." She turned toward him, her chest tight with emotion. "I want you here. I need you here." The words felt natural, like they had always belonged to her. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, there was no longer any distance between them. He nodded, his expression soft but resolute. "I'm not going anywhere, Leena. You and these kids, we're in this together." A sense of peace washed over her, one she hadn't known in years. She turned her attention back to the babies, their tiny faces scrunched in sleep, their soft breathing the only sound that filled the room. Damien sat beside her, his presence a quiet anchor. As the hours passed, the night deepened, and the quiet bond between them grew stronger. Leena allowed herself to rest, her body finally giving in to the exhaustion that had been building for days. But even as she drifted in and out of sleep, her heart never let go of the newfound sense of belonging. She had always thought that the love she shared with James would be her anchor, but it was clear now that love wasn't always about promises or grand gestures. It was about showing up when it mattered, about being there in the moments of silence, in the times of need. As the morning light began to filter through the windows, casting soft rays across the room, Leena felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, and there would be challenges, but for the first time, she was no longer facing them alone. She was with Damien, and together they would give their children the future they deserved. Her heart beat with a steady rhythm now, one that promised a future built on love, not expectation. And in the quiet moments, with the twins nestled safely in her arms, she knew they were finally where they were meant to be. Her family, her new beginning, had begun as the soft glow of the morning sun filled the room. Leena gently shifted in the bed, the weight of her twins' small bodies resting peacefully against her. She breathed deeply, savoring the calm, knowing that the world outside had yet to stir. Damien was still there, his presence a comforting constant. He was sitting quietly, watching over them, his eyes never leaving the children. Leena glanced at him, her heart swelling with a quiet kind of gratitude. "You've changed everything for me, Damien," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know where I would be without you." Damien turned his gaze toward her, his eyes warm but focused, full of understanding. "You don't have to thank me, Leena," he replied softly. This is where I want to be. With you." With them. Her chest tightened, the weight of his words sinking deep into her heart. In the quiet of that room, everything felt right. There were no expectations, no pressures, just the simplicity of being present for each other. Leena shifted, carefully cradling her babies in her arms, their tiny fingers curling around hers. Damien leaned forward, his hands reaching out instinctively to help her, his touch tender and gentle as he adjusted the baby in her arms. The act, so small yet so intimate, spoke volumes to Leena. He was here, truly here, in every way that mattered. For the first time in a long time, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. There were no more doubts. No more wondering if anyone would truly be there for her. Damien had proven that, in a way that nothing else could. They had come through the storm together, literally and figuratively, and now they were building something beautiful. Her heart raced as she looked at him, not just as the man who had saved her in the final moments of her pregnancy, but as someone who had given her something far more valuable than she had ever expected. He had given her a chance at real love. Not just love born from shared ambitions or mutual convenience, but a love built from a deep, unwavering bond, the kind that could withstand any trial. "We have so much to look forward to," Leena whispered, a smile touching her lips. "We'll figure it out together." Damien nodded, his expression filled with quiet resolve. "We will," he agreed. "One day at a time." The room felt warmer now, not from the sunlight but from the love that had taken root between them. Outside, the storm had completely passed, leaving only traces of rain on the windows. The world outside was fresh and new, just like their lives together. Leena allowed herself to breathe freely, knowing that no matter what the future held, they would face it side by side. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of what was to come. With Damien beside her, they would navigate every storm, every uncertainty, and build a life full of love and possibility. A life that was truly theirs. And as the babies shifted in her arms, their little faces peaceful in sleep, Leena knew that this new beginning, was exactly where she was meant to be. The morning continued to unfold gently, the soft hum of the world outside filling the air. Leena sat up a little straighter, carefully adjusting her position so she could cradle her twins more comfortably. Damien remained by her side, watching her with a quiet affection that warmed her heart. She looked down at the two tiny faces nestled in her arms, their peaceful expressions a stark contrast to the chaos of the past weeks. For the first time in a long time, the weight of everything, the betrayal, the disappointment, the uncertainty, seemed to fade away. In its place was a feeling of peace, of belonging. Damien's voice broke the silence, as soft as the light filtering through the curtains. "What do you think they'll be like when they grow up?" he asked, his gaze locked on the babies, a look of wonder in his eyes. Leena smiled softly, the question filling her with a sense of hope. "I don't know," she said. "But I know they'll be strong. They'll be loved." Damien's hand moved gently to her shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I'll make sure of that," he said, his voice steady, filled with promise. Leena looked up at him, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I know you will," she whispered. "And I'll be there every step of the way, too." There was something about his words, the certainty, the gentleness, that made her heart swell with a love she hadn't thought possible. It wasn't just about him being a father to her children. It was about him being her partner, her equal. Together, they had created something beautiful, and now, together, they would raise their family, brick by brick, day by day. A soft knock at the door interrupted their quiet moment. Leena turned her head, her heart skipping a beat. "Who could that be?" she asked, a little surprised, considering the early hour. Damien gave her a reassuring smile before standing up. "I'll check," he said, his voice calm, but there was a glimmer of concern in his eyes. He opened the door slowly, revealing a familiar face, a nurse from a hospital, holding a small bundle of paperwork. "Morning, Mr. and Mrs. Hargrave," the nurse greeted with a warm smile. "I just brought the discharge papers and a few instructions for Leena and the babies. I hope you don't mind me coming by this early." Leena looked up, surprised, but grateful. "Of course not, thank you." Damien nodded, taking the papers from the nurse, but before he could close the door, the nurse hesitated, looking back at him. "Mr. Hargrave, if I may say, you've done something remarkable. It's not every day we see someone step up like you did. I just wanted to let you know how much we all admire it." Damien's face softened, his usual reserved nature melting into something far warmer. "Thank you," he said simply, and with a gentle nod, he closed the door. Leena's gaze turned back to him, a spark of pride igniting in her chest. "You know, you really have changed everything," she murmured, her voice full of awe. Damien's eyes flickered toward her, and he smiled, walking back to her side. "I just did what I had to do," he said, his voice gentle but with an edge of sincerity that Leena knew was deeply genuine. He looked down at the twins, still nestled in her arms, and for a moment the weight of their responsibilities settled between them. But it wasn't a burden, it was a gift. "We'll take care of them together," Damien added quietly, his hand brushing against her cheek. Leena nodded, her heart full of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: trust. With the nurse's visit and the discharge papers in hand, the next step was clear. It was time to take their little family home. And as they prepared to leave the safe haven of the hospital, Leena felt a quiet thrill run through her. This was just the beginning. She and Damien, the twins, their future, it was all waiting for them, full of unknowns and possibilities, but Leena knew one thing for sure: they would face it all, together. As Damien carefully took one of the twins from her arms, Leena stood, her legs a little unsteady from the physical toll of childbirth, but her heart stronger than it had ever been. "Ready?" Damien asked, his voice low, but with a hint of excitement. Leena looked up at him, her eyes shining with hope. "Ready," she replied. And with that, they stepped into the future, a future they would build, piece by piece, with love, patience, and the quiet assurance that no matter what happened, they would always have each other. As they walked toward the door, the world outside seemed to hold its breath. The soft light of the morning bathed the hallway, but it felt like a fresh start was waiting just beyond the threshold. Leena's heart beat steadily as they reached the elevator, her hand instinctively reaching out for Damien's. The twins, wrapped snugly in their blankets, slept soundly in their arms, oblivious to the world beyond the hospital doors. Damien pressed the elevator button, his hand still clasped around hers. "I never thought it would be like this," Leena murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Damien turned his head toward her, his eyes filled with understanding. "Life has a way of surprising us," he said quietly. She nodded, her gaze turning down to the twins, who had already begun to stir in their sleep, their tiny hands flexing. "I'm scared, Damien," she admitted, her voice shaky as she looked at the little faces in her arms. "What if I'm not enough for them?" Damien's thumb gently traced her hand, offering quiet comfort. "Leena, you already are enough. You're everything to them. And as for the rest, we'll figure it out. Together." The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside. The soft hum of the machine was the only sound as the doors closed behind them. The ride down to the ground floor felt slower than usual, each moment stretching into the next, filled with anticipation. Leena swallowed, her nerves creeping in despite Damien's reassuring words. What awaited them outside was the unknown, the true beginning of their new life, a life where they weren't just surviving anymore. They were building something, brick by brick. The elevator stopped, and the doors slid open. They stepped out, the soft sounds of the hospital's bustle in the background. As they made their way outside, the world felt like it had changed in ways they couldn't yet grasp. The air was fresh, the streets bathed in the warm light of the early morning. Leena's eyes scanned the horizon, feeling a sense of peace, but also a quiet thrill. Everything had been leading to this moment. They reached the car, and Damien carefully placed one of the twins in the car seat before helping Leena inside. Once she was settled, he closed the door softly and walked around to the other side, slipping into the driver's seat. As the car engine hummed to life, Damien's eyes briefly met hers. "Are you okay?" Leena smiled, her heart swelling. "I'm more than okay," she whispered. "I'm ready." The car pulled away from the hospital, the streets ahead stretching out like an open road. The sound of the tires rolling over the pavement was steady and calming, almost like the rhythm of a heart beating in time with theirs. Leena rested her head against the window, the sun warming her face, and for the first time, she allowed herself to truly relax. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy. No life ever is. But they had each other, and that was enough. As the cityscape slowly turned into the quieter roads leading toward their home, Leena closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the scent of fresh air, of new beginnings. She could feel the weight of the past, the betrayal, and the heartbreak, starting to lift with every mile they put behind them. Damien, glancing at her, caught the softness in her eyes. "We're going to make it, Leena." All of us. She turned toward him, her heart full. Yes, she whispered, her voice steady now, filled with conviction. We will. And with that, the car continued down the road, carrying them toward a future they would shape together. A future filled with love, hope, and the quiet promise of family. As they drove into the horizon, Leena knew that their new chapter had just begun. And it would be everything they made of it. The car continued its steady journey, the road ahead stretching out like a promise. Leena sat in the quiet comfort, her eyes drifting between Damien and the peaceful twins in her arms. A sense of calm had settled over her, despite the uncertainty that once plagued her mind. The world outside seemed to slip away as the familiar scenery of the city faded into the distance, replaced by the tranquility of their new life waiting for them at home. Damien's hand reached out, briefly resting on hers as he kept his eyes on the road. You know, he said softly, his voice breaking the comfortable silence, I've never really believed in fate, but everything feels like it's been leading to this. To us. Leena smiled, her heart warmed by his words. I used to think the same thing. But now, I don't know. Maybe everything does happen for a reason. They shared a look, a quiet connection that spoke volumes, and Leena found herself feeling more certain about the future than she ever had before. Whatever the reason, Damien continued, his voice steady and calm, I'm glad it brought us here. Leena nodded, her smile deepening. Me too. The city slowly faded into the background as they entered quieter streets, the trees on either side of the road growing taller, the sounds of the world outside muffled by the comfort inside the car. Leena turned her gaze back to the twins, their tiny faces peaceful in sleep, their hands still curled around hers. She had carried them for so long, through every fear, every doubt, every heartbreak, and now they were here. Her children. Her family. It was hard to grasp that the life she had known, the one filled with emptiness and longing, was no longer her reality. The life she was building now was rooted in love, not in the hollow promises of the past. She reached out a hand to gently touch Damien's arm, her fingers brushing against the sleeve of his shirt. I don't think I could have done this without you, she admitted, her voice quiet but full of meaning. Damien glanced at her, his expression softening. You've done more than you know, Leena. You've brought us here. Together. The simplicity of his words, the truth in them, caused a tear to slip down her cheek. It wasn't sadness, but a profound sense of release. She had spent so much time holding on to the past, to things that didn't serve her, but now, with Damien beside her, she was finally able to let go. The car continued down the road, its engine a comforting hum as the day began to settle into dusk. Leena knew there would be challenges ahead, moments when fear or doubt would resurface, but she also knew that they would face them together. The distance from the city seemed to close, and soon, they were pulling into a familiar driveway. Home. As the car came to a stop, Damien turned off the engine and looked at her. This is it, he said softly. Our new beginning. Leena nodded, her heart swelling with love, knowing that this was only the start of the rest of their lives together. Damien helped her out of the car, gently cradling one of the twins in his arms as they made their way to the front door. Leena paused before entering, taking a moment to look around. This was their space now. This home, this life, was theirs to shape. With Damien by her side, she felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. And as the door swung open and they stepped inside, the warmth of their new life enveloped them like a soft embrace. Everything had led to this moment. And together, they would make it everything they dreamed of. As the door closed softly behind them, the house seemed to welcome them with open arms. The soft warmth of their new home wrapped around Leena like a comforting blanket, and she couldn't help but let out a deep breath, a mixture of relief and joy. The twins, still cradled in their arms, were sound asleep, their tiny faces peaceful. Damien stood beside her, his eyes filled with quiet determination, and for the first time in a long time, Leena felt the weight of the world shift off her shoulders. This is it, Leena, Damien said, his voice filled with quiet reverence. This is our home now. Our family. Leena looked at him, her heart full. She felt the truth of his words resonate deep within her. The life she had once thought would define her, the world of high-powered meetings, fleeting moments of affection, and hollow promises, was behind her now. She had found something far more real, far more precious. A love that wasn't bound by ambition, but by heart. A new chapter, Leena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Damien nodded, stepping closer to her. He gently placed one of the twins into a cozy bassinet beside their bed, then turned to face her. "We're going to do this together. Every step of the way." Leena stepped forward, her hand brushing against his. "Yes. Together." She could already see their future unfolding, one filled with simple joys and deep moments of connection. A future of laughter, shared dreams, and the undeniable bond of a family. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be real. It would be theirs. Damien pulled her into his arms, and for a moment they just stood there, surrounded by the quiet stillness of their new life. The twins were safe, their home was warm, and the future was filled with infinite possibilities. Leena closed her eyes, savoring the feeling of his embrace. She had been lost for so long, struggling to find her place in a world that felt cold and distant. But now she had found it. She had found herself, in the most unexpected way. And as the moonlight poured through the window, casting a soft glow over the room, she knew that everything had led her to this moment, to the life she had always dreamed of, but never thought was possible. This was her family. This was her home. And for the first time, Leena was ready to step fully into the future, to embrace whatever came their way. Together. As the quiet of the night wrapped around them, Leena looked up at Damien, her heart overflowing with love. "Thank you," she whispered. Damien smiled, his gaze full of tenderness. "No need to thank me. We're in this together, always." And as the stars glistened outside, the world felt as if it had finally settled into place, perfectly in tune with their new beginning. The story had come full circle. And their journey, just beginning, would be everything they had hoped for and more.